Welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club podcast. I am your host, Jerry Garcia.
And I am your other host, Sheena White.
We wanted to discuss the worst 3 mistakes blue collar business owners can make. So we're going to talk about some mistakes that we've seen business owners make and maybe how to correct them and why they're mistakes and why it's so important to not keep them as mistakes.
Number one, that is thinking you can outsell all your other issues. So I see so many trades business owners, and actually this is not even just the trades. They think that sales is the one thing that matters. And so I'm not discounting sales. Sales is super important. You can't have a business without sales, right? Sometimes there are other things that can be just as important, if not more important, than how much you sell. Think of your business like a car, and sales is like fuel in the gas tank. You're not going anywhere if you don't have fuel in the gas tank, but you can fill up your tank as much as you want. And if you have a blown head gasket, you're also not going anywhere. But you have to think about, capacity, your team, especially in the trades. A lot of times having another crew is not just hiring a couple people. A lot of times it's getting a whole new truck, getting new equipment, huge capital expenditure to having another crew. And then once you have that other crew, then they're out there, you have to manage their work. Like you said, a person to manage it. You also have to with that customer. So then you're dealing with 2 customers a day instead of 1. So a lot of times, if you focus on everything below the revenue line on your profit and loss report, maximizing those things, how can we sell better? Well, maybe we increase our prices, do services that are higher margin. How do we create more production out of our crew? How do we buy better from our suppliers so that we're paying less for our products? And then our overhead. How do we reduce our marketing that our cost of acquisition is lower? How do we have a more lean in-office team that we can have more capacity with less humans? There's so much stuff that goes into your profitability that has nothing to do with your sales. Think back to when I had a concrete company, actually the same year that we found out our accountant was embezzling all of our tax money. I also realized that we were only profitable about 4%. Actually, my employees were making way more money. That was totally
We go back to this discussion often about how you think starting the business is going to bring all the money into your pocket when that's not necessarily
not
the case.
Always true. My instant reaction to we're not making enough money is to sell more, because that's what most people's instant reaction is. Okay, I'll just go sell more and then I'll make more. At the time, I was very upset about this, and now I realize this was probably the best thing my ex ever said to me. He was like, I'm not working more. You need to figure it out. If I have to figure this out, if I can't sell more, if I'm capped here, this is the capacity and I want to make more, well, then I have to figure out the other variable. How much we were using of our supplies, how much we were paying for them, how much production we are getting out of our team every day. Overhead looking like in terms of their pay. Were we paying a ton of overtime? All these different variables. And so I was able to go from that 4% profit to 24% profit, which was way better. In one single year. I literally didn't sell $1 more.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't let me.
I've heard you tell these types of stories enough. It's incredible to me that some people don't understand their business enough to really price out like the cost of a certain job. Some people like doing a specific thing because they find it fun, but that particular type of job could be what's actually costing their business the most. You may have a specific type of flooring that you like to do, but that flooring takes longer and it takes an additional crew member and it's more expensive to acquire, and you're not charging that difference. The margin on that type of flooring is much worse. Every time you sell one of those jobs, you may actually be costing yourself money. More sales is not helping your business at all. More sales is actually costing you business, and that's I think a good example of kind of what you're talking about and why sales is not always the answer.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I'll see people who they have an estimate, and the estimate says that they should be making like crazy money. But in reality, they're not. And so it's like, well, your estimated, your projected, and your actual are not lining up so bad because they're not taking that estimate and pulling it through as a project budget. They're not looking at, okay, we have our projected. They're not looking at their projected versus their actual, and all of these different things that just seem complicated. But really, when you pull it down, you've already done most of the work. if you did your estimate properly.
Do you go back retroactively then and say, look, okay, we started with this estimate on this job. Do you then review it after the job to say, okay, well, here's what we actually spent and here's how we should be charging based on this cost, or how we can cut this cost down closer to our estimate? Is that what you do? Is that how you kind of reevaluate that?
I mean, you could do it that way, but that comes down to if you're actually costing out all of your supplies and all of your labor, which sometimes people do and sometimes they don't. Okay. So I think that's where you start, right? You first have to start actual job costing and figuring out how much labor and materials do we actually use on this job.
Yeah.
Whether it's small or big, it doesn't matter. We have to figure out our actuals. And then we can say, okay, was our estimate off because the pricing was off or because we had wastage? Where was our estimate off? Did this just take a lot longer than we thought it was going to take? I see sometimes people really undercounting their overhead, thinking that a job will take 2 days, and then they don't really take into account how much 2 days worth of overhead is. Then the job takes 3 days and they were already in the hole in overhead and now they even more are. So there's a lot of different variables there, but the first step is taking that estimate where you said, okay, hey customer, this is how much we're going to charge you. Hopefully you didn't pull that number just out of the sky, which I have seen before and is not what I would suggest. Really think about how many days is this going to take? How much is our overhead per day? How much supplies and material is this going to take? And then adding a cushion in there. And that should be where your pricing starts. So taking that estimate and really pulling it through the actual job production into the end so that you can run a job by job profit analysis.
It's interesting. I've learned a lot just by being in your presence a lot while you're on calls. And I would agree with you that that's number one, thinking that sales will solve all your problems when a lot of times that's actually one of the final steps. And a lot of that back end work is not necessarily stuff that we think about from a non-business owner standpoint. And most of these business owners own a business, but they're not business people per se.
Well, I mean, it's not something you think originally. I mean, and I was guilty of it. Literally, I was exactly there. I was like, oh my gosh, I only made 20 grand. I cannot live on this another year. I just got to sell more. But that wasn't the answer. While it came in a really not so fun package, I'm very grateful that I was capped at that sales level the next year because it forced me to look at the other variables. And then we were able to easily hire more employees, get more equipment, get more trucks, expand our crews. Because then at 24% profit, I'm paying my own bills. Plus, then I have the capital to reinvest in my business without cash strapping myself or the business. That's when really our business was able to explode because we did have that profitability and we had the money to then put into it and do the things we wanted to do and then just keep going up and up and up.
That's definitely, I'd say, a mindset shift. Like you said, now you get to be the one to deliver that message. Like, hey, we're not gonna focus on more sales here. We're gonna we're gonna focus on the other stuff first and make that your client uncomfortable.
I mean, would you rather make $4 for every 100 or 24 for every 100? I mean, it's really what it comes down to. And then so once you get to that 20+% profitability, then heck yeah. Sales all the way.
Then we
Let's
ramp
do
it up,
it.
right? It's all about building scalable businesses, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We'll get to the number 2 worst mistake that blue collar business owners make. That's going to be not focusing on the future, like not making any sort of plans for the future, not only in your business but after your business. I talk more about the financial stuff after you retire, or planning for that retirement, or planning for a scenario where if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, your family still had money coming in and not relying solely on your work for that. Not planning ahead, I think, is one of the things that most people in general, not just business owners, but especially business owners, are guilty of. Not planning for everything back into the business 5-10 years down the road, realize that they've done not a single bit of saving for themselves, or taking too much money out of the business and spending it on things that aren't assets for you. They are just liabilities. Buying yourself a boat, buying yourself a brand new truck when you could have bought a used truck for $30,000 less that accomplishes the same goals. I think that's one of the biggest things, is not planning for the future, not just in the retirement. What's the next step for the business? How are we going to exit the business? And that's something that you can really help with on that end as well.
Yeah. So that leads us to number 3, which is not setting your business up to run without you. A lot of times as a business owner, it feels really good to be needed. Right? Who doesn't want to be needed? It feels really good to be so integral to your business that they can't go one day without you. But that does a couple things. First of all, it makes it so you can never sell your business. If you are so integral to the business, no one's gonna buy your business and then keep you on forever. Then you're not the owner anymore, and then you're not in charge. It creates a lot of issues. Trust me, I've seen it when people don't understand that they don't own the business anymore. And it's a very difficult transition.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're super integral to the business. And also, it keeps you stuck there. I mean, we talk a lot about creating financial freedom, but another thing is time freedom. If your business needs you every single day to be there, you have zero time freedom because you have to be there every single day. So you basically have built yourself a pretty, hopefully well-paying job, but it's still a job. You have to be there. When we think about selling a business, there's a lot of different things that a potential buyer looks for, but the first thing that they look for, the number one value driver that will give your business more value or less value, is that the entrepreneur is redundant, meaning they're completely useless and superfluous to the business.
Right.
So I always come in and I tell people, my job is to make you useless here. How they react is sometimes like, ugh, never gonna happen, or what? That sounds awful. But then they think about it for a second. They're like, well, that sounds awesome, but also awful, right? It's hard because you have to let go and realize that building your team is really where you're going to create value as an asset in the business. So a lot of times people, they don't think ahead and they don't think to creating their business as an asset. So they get stymied into being so integral and important that their business becomes not valuable.
Right. And that's what we talk about a lot. A lot of what I talk about on the financial side is planning for that passive income. Passive income, meaning completely passive, means if you are on the golf course or you are out camping with completely no reception, whatever it is that you like to do, if you're doing it, money's still coming in the bank. And you can do that for a month, you can do that for a year, you can do that for the rest of your life. And that's what we're planning for, right? We want to be able to give you, more than anything, the time freedom. And the way that you achieve that time freedom is through financial freedom. It is about getting that number. What is your number? What we want you to do at some point, we'll create a resource for this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you want to set the business up so that it can be passive at some point, right? Because whether you sell it or maybe you want to keep it as just a passive investment, you want to be able to leave it at any time. And then also you want to have a legacy plan. You know, we're not all going to be here forever. You kind of touched on the hit by the bus test.
Yeah, right.
But I always say to people, what would happen to your business and to your family if you were hit by a bus tomorrow? And I know nobody really wants to think about that. It sounds terrible, but I've actually, unfortunately, had a colleague that had this happen. He had a massive heart attack when he was riding his bike. It was really devastating. This can happen to anyone, and so we have to set our businesses up that they can continue on without us.
Right, and there has to be plans in place, right? Not only just plans of legacy on management and ownership, not even getting into life insurance and things like that. There's just so much to plan for. You can have peace of mind, and your family, your spouse, your children, whoever it is, can have peace of mind that they're going to be okay if the worst happens. And we all have to plan for that. And it takes time. That this is not something that most of us can do overnight. It's something to think about. That's another thing to build toward. Everything we were saying, like we said, we don't provide a lot of short-term solutions here. We provide a lot of long-term solutions, but the type of long-term solutions that we help you plan for are the type that are long-lasting, are going to be the biggest peace of mind you can ever have.
Yeah. When thinking about creating your business so that you literally don't necessarily have to be there, a really great book resource, because I love books. In that book, he talks about eventually taking an entire month off to where you are available like super emergency only. And it takes a lot of planning and a lot of structure in order to take that month off. But he uses a month because most of the time in most businesses, a full sales cycle or full cycle in the business is a month long. So if you can literally leave for 4 weeks, go on vacation and come back and things are still running smoothly, then you have effectively made yourself redundant in the business, and then you know you have a true asset. If you want to look more into kind of starting this process, Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz. It's a really great book.
These are the types of things that we plan for, the mistakes we want you to avoid, and the things that we want you to start thinking about now, no matter where you are on that journey. Hopefully some of you are in a place where you've already thought about these things and you've already got them situated. But if you're not, even if you haven't started a business yet, starting with these things in mind is the best way to do it. Even if you already got a business running, thinking about these things now is better than thinking about them later.
Yeah, definitely. Well, be sure to check us out on our Facebook group, the Blue Collar Wealth Club Facebook group. We will catch you next time.
Awesome.